Okay, I think that's much better. My audio should be audible. So let's just start off this stream. Just doing some NGRX setup with Angular 17. So I thought I'd stream it. It's probably going to be a very quick stream, so why not? Anyway, so let me share my screen. This is the one. So you all should be able to see my screen now. Whoever's on, I have no idea who's on the stream or if anyone is. But anyway, let's get into it. So essentially, I have here is an Angular 17 app. We can go through some of the specifics. So let's go to first of all the app component. So here we have the app component. I don't need that anymore. That's just an unused import. So yes, we have this app component. This app component is just, I'm just playing around with signals. Just some very basic stuff, just to get used to it. I know it's quite a big part of Angular and the whole Angular ecosystem going forward. So a good thing to focus on. So actually, Angular, I think since version 15, has this concept of standalone components. So I guess these are some of the new features that we see in Angular. And in Angular 17, I'm trying to get used to using these standalone components. I mean, ultimately, they are just like a scam. If anyone's familiar with scams, like single component Angular modules, which was popular community as a way to get around some restrictions with the NG module, because before this syntax was available, like the component decorator, having the imports and provider as a standalone component that didn't need to live in an NG module, you actually had a lot more difficulty doing this. So just wait for 1 second. I just need to plug in my laptop because it's about to turn off. Just bear with me for 1 second. That's typical me. Laptop's always going to turn off. Save that electric, you know. So yeah, essentially, before you could create a component without a module, you had to use a NG module. I'm sure many of us know this. And this is still available. So it's all backwards compatible. You can still use an NG module. This is just an example. I won't import it just so we don't get the type errors. I mean, we're still going to get a type error here, but not a whole list of them in the component. And obviously you'd have your NG module, and then you would add like your imports, your declarations. I'm sure there's an instance of this somewhere actually that we can just refer to. No, there isn't actually. So it looks like this Angular CLI generated Angular 17 project doesn't have the NG module in it, which I guess is quite telling, right? It's trying to tell us that this isn't really something that the Angular team wants to support going forward, because there's quite a few restrictions. So I guess the reason this is important is because when you're setting up the NGRX within an Angular project that only has standalone components, the way that you, and I found this out recently when playing around with this, the way that you actually need to import or set up the store is a bit different. So let me give you an example. So we have this in our app module, we have the app config, which is essentially just like it's just like an object that contains some providers. It can provide, let's look at the interface. It's not just providers, as in the typical provider. You can have environment providers as well, which are slightly different. We don't really need to go into those right now. But yeah, this is the main thing. And then this is just added to your main config, your main TS. So this is actually the application config that's bootstrapped into your application. So I guess that's an interesting difference there. Also, when we go into the merge application config, let me focus on just the NGRX related content here. So when you import the store module, I guess we're all used to, if you're familiar with NGRX, the store module is just like it's just a module that is that allows you to configure your store for that particular module. I guess, which is quite interesting, right? Because with the NG module concept, this made a lot more sense because you'd be importing this at the module level, which would kind of be more of a horizontal relationship between that and the component. Whereas with this, we only have standalone components here. So if I were to let's say take all of this store module configuration and were to put in my app component, that's going to error. And the reason it's going to error, if we hover over it, is sorry, it should be a provider. The reason it's going to error, even if we import, is because this type module with providers, and we pass in the generic, or the generic is passed in for the type, the store root module is not assignable to type provider. So let's look at why this makes sense. If we click into just a typical component provider interface, we see that this takes a provider, and this provider is obviously it's an array. You can pass in as many providers as you like, and as you can see, we just have like a declared type of different available types we can add in. So it's type provider, value provider, class provider, constructor provider, existing provider, and factory provider. These are use an injection token, and you wanted to provide something to a module, and then you wanted to use a factory to generate the contents of that provider. And these are the kind of other different ways, like use class, use value. These are different ways you can provide a module or provider inside of a NG module. But with this, this store module for root, let's actually see what the store module returns. So we can see the for root here, and we can see the for root actually returns this module with providers, which is essentially a wrapper around an NG module that associates it with providers. So this is a different type to what this is expecting. This is expecting just a normal provider, whereas this store module is providing a module with providers as the type. So we're going to get an error, right? And the reason we get an error is because in Angular 17, we're trying to move away from the NG module. So that's why we go to our app config, and in the import providers from, we can see this is the way that we want to import our providers into our application config for the bootstrapping context. So I think it's important to click into here. So we can see this import providers from take some sources. So I guess we can click into this There's quite a lot of clicking through, but this is all worth it. I think we get to see some of the internals of how um, Angular modules and Angular providers and module configuration, component configuration is working. So you see this import provider source. Now, the interesting thing about this import provider source is it either takes in a type, which I'm not really too sure why I'd want to do that right now. Maybe if someone in the comments is able to answer that, feel free to. Or it can actually take this module with providers, which as we saw here in our app config, or let's go to our app component actually. This is actually the type that the store module for root is returning. And we can see that this is here, the module with providers. And it's saying unknown, which is fine. So it can take in, I guess, any, because we don't know the type up front. So hence why it's unknown. So this is valid. This is a valid configuration. So yeah, the reason this is so interesting is that means when we are dealing with an NGRX store, I mean, I'm sure the NGRX team have already come up with a strategy, or maybe they've released one, I just haven't seen it yet, to deal with this. That means you're going to have to import your store module, or you're going to provide your store module into your application, your main application context, as an import from, as we can see here in the import providers from. You can't actually just provide it into any module. I guess that kind of has quite a few implications on the overall application architecture. Someone, I guess, could argue that we could just say, and maybe you can actually do this. Let's have a look. If you can just import providers from into your providers, and we could just import this here. And then we say the store module, which is here, goes inside, and you can see that doesn't work, which again makes sense because ultimately this is not a normal provider. The store module for root is a for root provider, meaning that this is the root level application context. So if we were to say for let's